preparation of slides, and we say that there are two types of slides. We have a permanent slide and we have a temporary slide. We said a temporary slide is a slide which is used and just for a short while and then it is discarded, while a permanent slide is a slide which you use for a long period of time. Like for example, you can take a section from a monocotyledonous stem and you observe it and you put it in a permanent slide where you can observe it today, after 1 month, after 1 year, or even after 2 years. So that's a permanent slide. So we also went ahead and talked about reasons why things or procedure that you follow when you're preparing a permanent slide and a temporary slide. And one of the procedure we talked about was sectioning, where we said that sectioning is making very thin cuts of a specimen which you want to observe. And you said the reason why we do sectioning is so that we can allow light to pass through. So we cut very thin sections or parts of a specimen that we're observing. And we also say that this is done for the purposes of allowing light to pass through. And we said for us to achieve the sections, we use a sharp razor so that we don't damage the cells. We also went ahead and talked about staining, where we said that staining is adding of dye on a specimen to make it easily visible in while observing using a microscope. We also went ahead and talked about adding a drop of water, which we said its essence or importance is to keep the cells turgid and to prevent dehydration. After that, we talked about mounting, where we said mounting is placing of a specimen on a slide and then covering it with a cover slip. We said the reason why we cover a specimen with a cover slip is to prevent any dust or contamination the specimen that we are observing. So we went ahead and talked about all that. So today I want us to talk about several things. As you can see in your display, one place to another like a sperm. You see, like a sperm, the male reproductive gamete, it is supposed to swim in the female reproductive system. So therefore, it must have some characteristics or adaptations which it must have so that it can be able to swim. Like for example, a sperm is able to swim in the female reproductive system because it has a tail, it has a lot of mitochondria, which we say they are cell organelles that provide energy for that movement. So basically, when a cell is specialized, it is a cell that has been modified to perform specific functions. Like for example, let me use an example of maybe a car, right? So there are those people that buy normal cars and they modify them so that they can have higher speed, they can carry bulky loads. So that modification or making something to have a features which will enable it to perform a specific function. So in biology, cell specialization is structural modification of the cells to perform specific functions. Now on the same, remember we said biology is the branch of science that deals with the study of living things. And we said living beings are both plants and animals. So when we're studying about something, we'll study about both plants and animals. So let's talk about specialized cells in plants. Examples of specialized cells in plants are the root hair cell, okay? Root hair cell. Now, what is a root hair cell? A root hair cell are very small structures which are found in the roots, and their function is to absorb water from the soil. They increase surface area for absorption of water. So how are they modified? We are going to see in a few minutes. Then we have another cell in plants that is specialized. We have the guard cell. The guard cell is found in the stomata area, stomato area. Actually, stomatas being the openings of a leaf, in every stomata, there are two guard cells. So in between the two guard cells, that's why we have the opening which we call the stomata. And then we have the palisade cell. This is the second outermost layer of the leaf. It has a lot of chloroplast for photosynthesis, like we are going to see. Now we look at specialized cells in animals. Like we have a nerve cell. We're going to see an example of a nerve cell in a few minutes. But a nerve cell is basically used to connect your body parts so that we can conduct something we call impulses. Now, impulses are electric signals. Like, for example, ukichunwa na mtu. The reason why you feel the pain is because when you get pinched, that pinching is sent to the brain. The brain is going to interpret the pinching. The pinching is going, the brain will send instruction to the muscle so that they can contract and you withdraw the hand. So a nerve cell is used to conduct impulses or electric signals in the body. So then we have a sperm cell. A sperm cell is a male gamete which is used for infertilization, and it is also a specialized cell. Another specialized cell in animals ni in your illustration, we have a root hair cell. So a root hair cell is what I'm displaying here. So we have the root hair cell like an extension. It is an extension of the root. Okay. So a root hair cell is an extension of the root. So this is the root hair cell, that extension. And roots have very many root hair cells. Now the reason why these root hair cells are formed as extensions in roots is because they absorb a lot of water. So the more they are, the higher the absorption rate. Okay. So now, how is a root hair cell specialized? How is it specialized? If you look at it, you'll see it is elongated, ni refu kabisa, elongated and protruding so that it can absorb water from the soil. So, structural modification or adaptation ni it has an extension or what we call the root hair so that it can absorb as much water as possible. So, the specialized cell is root hair cell. How is it specialized? It has an extension or it is elongated to reach far areas to absorb as much water as possible. So the function of a root hair cell is that it increases surface area for absorption of water and mineral salts from the soil. Increases surface area. What do we mean by it increases surface area? What we mean is it is not the function of a root hair cell to absorb water. It is the function of the root to absorb water. However, the root has extension which will increase surface area for water absorption and mineral salts. So the function of a root hair is not to absorb water but to increase the surface area for absorption. Okay, I hope you've gotten that. Then we have another specialized cell is a guard cell. Now what I'm displaying here is a guard cell, and guard cells are bean shaped. Usually they are two, like you can see here. We have the guard cell here. So let me show you the guard cell. This is one guard cell. Then we have another guard cell, that one. And in between two guard cells, we have that part there, which we're calling the stomata. You see that opening there? That is what we're calling the stomata. This opening is very important because this is where gases pass through in plants. This is where water passes through during transpiration. So a lot of things happen here. So how is the guard cell specialized? Now, if you look at a guard cell, it has chloroplast. You can see the chloroplast, meaning it is capable of carrying out photosynthesis. Now, when we'll be talking about gaseous exchange, we'll be looking at how the guard cell opens the stomata and how it closes the stomata. But for now, the most important thing to note is the adaptations or modifications of a guard cell. It is it has chloroplast, okay? And remember, we said when you're talking about cell organelles that chloroplasts are used in photosynthesis, for they trap sunlight, which is used to carry out photosynthesis. Sawa sawa. Another adaptation of the guard cell is that if you look at this guard cell, it has two layers, okay? So it has the outer layer, this one. Can you see it from that point all the way? And then we have the inner layer. And if you look at the two layers, this layer here huku nje imechorwa na kalaini kamoja, alafu hii ndani it has two lines in it. What does that mean? It means the inner one is thicker compared to the outer one. Now that's an adaptation. How is that important? What is the importance of the outer wall being thinner than the inner wall? When the outer wall is thin, you'll realize that it will stretch more. When it stretches more than the inner one, it allows the stomata to open. Usually what happens is when the guard cell carries out photosynthesis using the chlorophyll and water and everything, this guard cell will accumulate with a lot of glucose. Okay? When it accumulates with glucose, glucose ni kama for example ile glucose huwa tunalamba, it is very sweet. Na ukiweka glucose kwa maji, hiyo maji inakuanga highly concentrated. So what happens here is the glucose formed during photosynthesis, it is going to make the concentration of the guard cell to be high, to rise. So when it rises, then we say that the guard cell has a higher concentration. It has a higher concentration of sugar than water. So what happens, the consequence of the guard cell having more sugar than the neighboring cells, water will start moving into the guard cell. So maji itatoka kwa neighboring cells ianze kuingia kwa guard cell. When water gets inside the guard cell, it causes the guard cell to start swelling. Ni kama balloon. Ukipuliza balloon venye inafura, so the guard cell will start swelling. Why? Because water is moving from the neighboring cells and moves inside the guard cell. So this causes the guard cell to start swelling. And because the outer wall is thinner than the inner wall, the guard cell swells more on the outer side than the inner side. And this creates a space in between, which now we call the stomata. Are we together up to that point? So I'm saying that when the guard cell carries out photosynthesis, glucose accumulates inside the guard cell. And when glucose accumulates inside the guard cell, it makes the guard cell to be highly concentrated with sugar or glucose than water. This causes water to move from the neighboring cells like that, move like that. So eventually the guard cell will swell. But because the outer wall is thinner, it will swell more on the outside, but it will not swell as much on the inside. This causes this opening, which you're calling the stomata, to be formed, and hence we say that the guard cell has opened. So what are the adaptations of the guard cell to allow the opening and the closing of the stomata? Adaptation number one is that it has chloroplast. Okay, it has chloroplast, which is used for the process of photosynthesis. Adaptation number two is that the inner wall is thicker than the outer wall. The inner wall is thicker than the outer wall. What is the importance of the inner wall being thicker than the outer wall? This makes the thinner outer wall to stretch more than the thicker inner wall, and we've said this causes opening of the stomata. So what is the function of a guard cell? It controls opening and closing of the stomata, and at the same time it carries out photosynthesis. So those are the adaptations of the guard cell. We can comfortably then move to another specialized cell in plants, and this cell is a palisade cell. Now, palisade cell is a layer of a leaf in most plants, and with one adaptation of a palisade cell in plant is that that's another one, that's another one, that's another one. So all these chloroplasts, their function is to carry out photosynthesis. So it means this layer of cells in plants have a lot of chloroplast, which means they carry out a lot of the plant palisade cell. So function of the palisade cell to carry out photosynthesis. So from there, we can talk about specialized animal cells. So specialized animal cells. Someone is saying I'm breaking. Anyone else who is experiencing the issue of eye breaking? Am I stable now, Maura?
Yes. Now you are stable, but you are breaking.
I'm
At
breaking.
some
I'm
point.
sorry. So
At
even
some
right
point.
now I'm breaking.
Yeah. But now you're okay.
Oh, I'm okay, yeah?
Yeah.
I have to. Lagat, kindly kuwa standby so that you'll take over. Place yenye niko hakuna network very stable, but be standby. I will pass the mantle around saa tatu hapo. So be ready, get ready. Haya, so we continue. So now that we have learned about specialized cells in plants, we can talk about specialized cells in animals. Now, specialized cells in animals include number one, we have a nerve cell. A nerve cell. Now, what is the function of a nerve cell? A nerve cell receives and transmits nerve impulses. It receives and transmits nerve impulses. I'm sure you've heard of the word nerve before, but there's this word here which is an impulse. What is an impulse? You see, our body has an interesting way of functioning. Our bodies communicate, parts of our bodies communicate using some electrical signals known as impulses. Like, for example, if you touched a hot object, your body is going to interpret that extreme change in temperature into an impulse. So it will convert that heat into an electric signal known as an impulse. That impulse will be conducted across the body. If, for example, you touch with your hand, the impulse will be transmitted all the way to the brain, and the brain will interpret and it will determine that you're getting burnt. So, and then the brain will instruct the muscles of the hand to contract so that you can withdraw your hand from the source of power. If it is pain, you've been pinched or you've been pricked, the same thing will happen. The pricking will trigger the body to produce electrical signals known as impulses. Those signals will be conducted across the body all the way to the brain, where the brain will interpret it and instruct the muscles to contract. Okay. Something interesting is that even when maybe, for example, you're working near a hotel, or maybe you are working near a house where they have decided to cook some very sweet food, your your cells in the nose, okay, they will start detecting that sweet aroma of food. They will then convert that aroma into an electrical signal known as an impulse. The impulse will be conducted to the brain, and the brain will actually interpret that signal, and it will instruct the glands in your mouth to start salivating. That is the reason why we salivate when we feel when we smell some sweet aroma, or maybe when we see food. When you see food, the eyes will interpret will collect the impulse, which is now the vision of the food, converted into an impulse in the retina, and then that will be sent to the brain. The brain will interpret that and know this is meat, this is chapati, this is whatever type of food, and then it will respond by sending a signal to the glands, the salivary glands in the mouth, to produce food, saliva, which will be preparing your mouth for digestion. Okay, now those structures through which electric signals, because now I understand you, I know you have understood what a signal is or an impulse is. So those structures in the body that conduct or transport electric signals are known as nerve cells. An example of a nerve cell ni hii. This is an example of a nerve cell, and if you look at it, you can see the nucleus, you can see the axon, you can see the dendrite. Those are some of the structures that a nerve cell that enable it to conduct or transmit impulses or transport impulses in the body. Now, when we move on to Form 4 work, we are going to see the function of the dendrite. Okay. Now, the dendrites are basically the ones that are going to collect a change in the environment, like ukichomwa na kitu ama ukichunwa. And then you have the nucleus, which will control the function of the nerve cell. Then you have this elongated structure here known as the axon. The elongated structure, this one, the axon, that one, hii ya ndani, this one there, hiyo ya ndani. So that one, it is the one that is now responsible for conduction of impulses. So how is a nerve cell modified? It has axon and dendrites, which make it suitable for transmission of impulses. Another specialized cell that I want us to look at in animals is a sperm cell. Looks like a sperm cell is a gamete produced by the male. Okay, so male produce sperms, and these sperms are used fertilization process. Okay, so what happens is when a male ejaculates, they produce very many sperms which must swim against very incredible odds. Like, for example, in the female reproductive system, we have acidic medium, we have some cilia, hair-like structures which are found in there on the walls of the reproductive system in females, and the sperms have to swim against all those odds, against the acidic medium. It has to swim against the hairs, because some are going to be trapped in the hairs known as cilia in the female reproductive system. So they need a lot of energy to swim. So that's why they are modified, or they have adapted to having a tail. So a tail is able to propel the sperm forward. And then when you look at this specific part here of the of this sperm, you'll see that we have numerous mitochondria, very many mitochondria. Those mitochondria are responsible for producing energy, which will be used for the process of swimming across the female reproductive system. So therefore, sperm has been modified, or it has been made to contain mitochondria to provide energy, and also tails for swimming. So adaptations need, it has numerous mitochondria and a long tail for swimming. Function of the sperm cell: to swim, to reach and fertilize the egg. So that's another specialized cell in animals. Now we have other two specialized cell in animals. The first one is a red blood cell. Red blood cell. Now, if you look at a red blood cell, it has a biconcave shape. It has a biconcave shape. Now, what's a biconcave shape? A biconcave shape is a shape where this part here at the middle of the red blood cell, it is thinner than the outer part. So ukiangalia vizuri utaona the outer part is thicker than the inner part. So that's what we call a biconcave shape. Okay. Now, why does a red blood cell, why must it have a biconcave shape? Now, the importance of having a biconcave shape is the red blood cells. Now, carbon dioxide is transported from the tissue back to the lungs for excretion. Like, for example, let's talk about our legs. Like, for example, you're running in the field continuously for a long period of time. Your muscles of the feet must have energy. That energy will be supplied through through respiration, mitochondria. So it means that in the process of producing energy, some waste material such as carbon dioxide will be produced. Those waste materials will be transported back into the lungs for excretion. Like, for example, carbon dioxide ikiachwa kwa muscles, it will start causing muscle cramps, and then that will be a way of poisoning the body cells. So you'll have muscle cramps, okay? Sometimes you can have, yes, mostly it's muscle cramps, which will almost like paralyze your feet. So for the carbon dioxide to be removed from the tissues and the inner cells of the body, they are considered with the red blood cell. So the reason why the red blood cell is seen at the center is so that it can allow as much oxygen and carbon dioxide to diffuse in or move inside so that it can be transported to all parts of the body. Okay, that is the specialization of the red blood cell. So it has a biconcave shape. It also contains a pigment known as hemoglobin. It has a pigment known as hemoglobin. Now, what is hemoglobin? Hemoglobin is a pigment or a substance found inside the red blood cell. Its function is to absorb oxygen and sometimes carbon dioxide. So when oxygen diffuses inside the red blood cell, it moves inside and it gets dissolved in hemoglobin. So hemoglobin inakuanga ndani ya red blood cell throughout. Okay, so the moment oxygen gets inside the red blood cell, it diffuses or it combines, it dissolves in the hemoglobin, and then the hemoglobin will transport the oxygen across the body tissues to be used for respiration. If it is carbon dioxide, when carbon dioxide dissolves in the red blood cell, it is going to dissolve inside the hemoglobin and then it will be taken back to the lung for excretion. So that is the red blood cells. Then we have white blood cells. Now, white blood cells are used for protection in the body. Their function is to protect the body against infections. Ukiwa na ugonjwa kadogo, inakuja kwa mwili, inakusaidia kupigana na magonjwa. So red blood cells are very important in the body for they fight disease causing microorganisms. Now, how are the white blood cells um, adapted or modified to their function? Number one, all white blood cells have a large nucleus. So if you look at these ones here, you will see they have a large nucleus. One thing you should know about the red blood cells is red blood cells do not have nucleus at all. The reason why they do not have nucleus is to enhance or to allow packaging of oxygen. So the baby oxygen means that hemoglobin, we are going to have a lot. We are going to have a lot of hemoglobin in there. And then, because we want more room and space, we will have no nucleus. But in the white blood cells, as you can see here, we have nucleus. They could be nucleus which are circular, others are lobed based on the type of white blood cell. But the sense here is that the white blood cells must and will always have a nucleus. Now, what is the function of the nucleus? Used in killing and destroying the disease causing microorganisms. It is used in killing and destroying the disease causing microorganisms. So, how is a red blood cell? What is the other way in which a red blood cell is adapted? So the other way is that white blood cells are able to change shape. White blood cells are able to change shape. The reason why white blood cells are able to change shape is so that they can squeeze and fit in the blood vessels, and capillaries. So we said that white blood cells are able to squeeze and pass through the body cells because they are flexible. So the adaptations of the white blood cells, large nucleus, so that they can kill and engulf disease-causing microorganisms, and then they are able to change shape so that they can fit in the body blood vessels. Okay. Yes, so those are specialized cells in animals. Now, another specialized cell is a muscle cell. A muscle cell, okay? Now, a muscle cell is a cell that is found in our muscles. Now, we have very many muscles in the body. Actually, our bodies are made of muscles. Like, for example, we have a muscle known as the heart. The heart is the strongest muscle in the body, we would say, in terms of the function that it performs. It's not necessarily like the strongest in terms of force and power, but based on how much function it carries out, it has to be the strongest. Why? Because it pumps blood to all parts of the body. Now, we also have other muscles, like, for example, the gluteus muscles. We have the muscles on the hand. We have the muscles which are attached to the legs, muscles attached to the thighs, muscles attached to the jaws, muscles attached to the eyes, which allow us to blink, and very many other muscles in the body. Like, for example, we have muscles in our digestive system. The reason why when we swallow food, that food is smoothly swallowed, part of the reason is presence of muscles which contract and relax to push the food down through the digestive system. Okay. Now, how are muscle cells adapted to their function? The first adaptation is they have contractile fibrils. Now, if you look at the illustration here, you'll see the fibrils. Contractile fibrils are basically those structures which are found inside the muscles that will contract and relax because the muscles to either move, if it is in the like in the digestive system or reproductive system, or to generate energy. Another adaptation of a muscle is that it has numerous mitochondria. It might not be written here, but they have numerous mitochondria to produce energy for whichever function they are performing. If, for example, it is the muscles in the digestive system, they must have a lot of mitochondria to produce energy for the continuous contraction and relaxation of the muscle cells. Another specialized cell in animals is an egg cell. Now, an egg cell is a female reproductive gamete, and this one is where the sperm comes in and fuses with the nucleus of the egg cell, causing a zygote to start developing in the womb of a mother. So, structural modification of an egg cell is that it has a large cytoplasm. It has a large cytoplasm. The reason has a large cytoplasm is because it must carry food which will be used in the early stages of development. So it allows there's plenty of enough nutrients which will be used by the embryo and the zygote as they develop in the womb before they start having features which can be used for the survival of the fetus. Very good. So those are examples of specialized cells in plants and animals. Now, one thing I want you to note is when we talk about the structure of a living organism, this structure begins with cells. Okay? Why cells? Because cells are the basic unit of a living organism. It means without cells, we cannot have living organisms. So it is from cells that we get living organisms. However, you cannot say that several cells will form an organism. No, there's a certain chronological order which they follow. Like for example, when you have numerous cells, you form when you have numerous cells, you form tissues. Okay, so we move from very many cells which will form a tissue. A tissue is going to connect with another tissue and form an organ. Okay, so when an organ is formed, then very many organs. Like for example, let's take a case of you. So you are made up of very many cells. Those cells formed tissues. Those tissues include something like blood. Blood is a tissue. Now, of course, saying blood is a tissue because it has very many cells. Like for example, we have the red blood cells, we have the white blood cells, and we have the similar characteristics. They might not be similar, but almost similar characteristics. Bottom line here is ones that perform almost a similar function. Okay. Now these tissues they will form organs. They will form organs. Now, an example of an organ includes an arm. An example of another organ includes an eye. An example of another organ in we have cells. When very many cells have come together and they perform a function for a particular reason, then we say those ones are tissues. So when tissues move together, they perform the same function or almost similar functions, and their aim is to come up with for example, with an activity. Like for example, in reproduction, we can have organs. In females, we can have ovaries, we can have the fallopian tube, we can have the womb, we can have the cervix. All those are organs, and those organs work together to achieve a specific function. Then we say that those organs now are no longer organs, but they are tissues. Now, after we talk about tissues, when you combine two or more tissues, when you combine several tissues to perform almost the same function, they form an organ. Okay, so when you have organs, organs will work together to achieve a particular function, forming what we call an organ system. Like, for example, I'm sure you've heard of the reproductive system, you've heard of the breathing system, you've also heard of the respiratory system. So, a system is a combination or a mixture of very many um, organs which perform similar functions, or better yet, if they're not performing a similar function, they are aiming at achieving a particular practice. Like for example, let's talk about the reproductive system. So in males, we have reproductive systems as the testes. The function of a testing is to produce sperms. Then from there, we have the epididymis. Okay, now the epididymis stores the produced sperms. Then we have the sperm duct which passes the sperms. Then we have the urethra where sperms pass out, and we have the penis in males that introduces the gametes or the sperms in the female reproductive system. So when you look at all these organs, they are different, yes, but they are performing almost similar functions with the aim of achieving one particular thing. Like for example, in the reproductive system, the aim is to produce or reproduce. So therefore, we can say that when we have several organs, we form several organ systems. And then when you have several organ systems like the reproductive system, the gaseous system, circulatory system, that is where we have the blood and everything, then we can therefore say that this is an organ system that will form an organism. Like for example, kama wewe, you are an organism made of organ systems. So tukikuangalia hivi tunasema this is an organism. Why is it an organism? It is made up of several organ systems. What are these organ systems? Reproductive system, respiratory system, circulatory system. Now, these respiratory systems, reproductive systems, and other systems, what makes them? They are made of organs. So these are now these tissues we're talking about. What forms them? cells. So the chronology of cell specialization begins work together for a common goal. They form organ system. When organ systems come together for a particular function, then we say they form an organism. They form we have examples of tissues in animals. We have epithelial tissue, which consists of epithelial cells or which are found in the outside of the body around the what here you can do is have examples of plant tissues, that is epidermal tissues. This one consists of a single layer of epidermal cells covering the outer surface of the leaf. And then we have palisade tissue. A palisade tissue, like we said previously, is a tissue or very many cells that have a lot of mitochondria, which are going to be used for what purpose? For photosynthesis. Not mitochondria, sorry, which have many chloroplasts, which will be used for photosynthesis. Then we have a vascular tissue, that is the vascular bundle and the xylem. It's also a tissue because it is made up of xylem cells and the phloem. So they form that tissue. From there, when we have several tissues, we form what we call ear and very many others. In plants, examples of organs include roots, leaves, flowers, stem, etc. So when we have several organs which have been grouped together, they form organ systems. An organ system is a group of organs that perform the same function or similar function. Examples include digestive system. So for example, if an organs, inatengenezwa na organs gani? We have the mouth which has a tongue, we have the stomach, we have the small intestine, we have the pancreas, we have the large intestine, which is now the colon, and very many other organs that come together to perform a similar function, which is digestion. Circular is modification of a cell to perform a specific function. We've given examples of specialized cells in plants, that is root hair cells. We have the guard cell, we have the palisade cell, we have also examples of specialized cells in animals, that is the nerve cell, sperm cell, red blood cells, white blood cells, and muscle cells. So we have also gone ahead and talked about all those specialized cells and their functions. And we said when we have several cells functioning in performing a similar function and they are working together, they form a tissue. And then when several tissues perform almost a similar function by working together, they form what we call organs. Examples of organs are those ones: stomach, brain, kidney. When several organs are grouped together and they perform a particular function that is almost similar, they become organ systems. So then organ systems are a combination. So that is it on cell specialization. So the next topic, if we don't have questions, because I'll give you a chance to ask questions on cell specialization and anything else, but the next topic which we are supposed to talk about that is highly examinable is cell physiology. But before I get to that point, can we now maybe take this opportunity and ask questions on cell specialization? So anyone with a question on cell specialization? So in whichever order, any question. Elewa, kama tumeelewa, tuna type we have understood so that we can move on if there is no question at all. Kindly give feedback so that we can move on if there's no question. If there's no question, we type to understood and then we move on. Is understood, then we can comfortably move on. So I hope everyone is hearing me. I hope I'm not breaking anymore. So let's dive right into the next topic, and this is cell physiology. Remember, we're still talking about cells. We're still talking about basic biology because we said living organisms are made of cells. So basic biology cell. Now, a cell we said is the basic structure of a living organism. Without cell, we cannot have organism because remember tumesema the order of an organism is that we have the smallest being the cell, then we have the second smallest being a tissue, then we have the third smallest being an organ, and then we have the organ systems, then finally we have the organism. So therefore, we need to understand how cells function. We need to know how would cells behave if, for example, they interact with the environment. Okay, how do cells behave when they interact with the environment? Now, with that being said, remember we said that a cell is, regardless of whether it is a plant and an animal cell, they have very many similar parts. Like, for example, we have the cell membrane. The other name for cell membrane is plasma membrane. If you look at this diagram that I have here, I have an illustration of an animal cell membrane or a plant cell membrane. Because remember we said both plants and animal cells have a cell membrane. The only difference is a plant cell has a cell wall, while a cell membrane is the only thing that an animal cell has. So therefore, we are going to have a structure of a cell membrane as illustrated here. But before we talk about the structure of a cell membrane, let's talk about the functions of a cell membrane. And we talked about them earlier. We said that a cell membrane encloses all the contents of the cell. It encloses all the contents of the cell, and also it controls or regulates movement of materials in and out of a cell. Because they have poles, that is cell membranes, they can control what gets inside and what leaves. characteristic of a cell membrane. How will you know a cell membrane if you see one? Now, a cell membrane is made of that these phospholipid layers, the reason why they are called phospholipid layers is because they have phosphorus and they have lipids. And tulisema lipids are fat. Phospholipids, they have phosphorus and they have fats. Okay, so a phospholipid layer has both phosphorus and fats. Then it has a protein layer. Okay, this protein layer, remember we said it is what makes when you get proteins are very sensitive to extreme changes in temperature. Okay, higher. Then we can therefore talk about properties of a cell membrane, characteristics of a cell membrane. What affects the cell membrane? Characteristic number one, a cell membrane is semi-permeable or it is selectively permeable. Why are we saying that a cell membrane is selectively permeable? Look at this illustration here. We have poles. We have very many poles in a cell membrane. Like for there, we have another one 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 there, another one there, another one there. So that means that the cell membrane has numerous poles. Now, one thing interesting about these poles is they only allow molecules which are small enough to pass through. If a molecule is so big such that it cannot fit through a cell membrane pore, we call semi-permeability. Semi means have, permeability means penetration. So only those molecules which are very small size will pass through because a cell membrane is semi-permeable. Okay. From there, we can talk about the other characteristic or feature of a cell membrane. That characteristic is cell membranes are sensitive to change. Hot water or anything that is very hot of the cell. So therefore, any high temperature above normal will destroy any cell membrane. That's why we're saying they are very sensitive to temperature and pH changes. Now, when you talk about pH, I'm sure you've heard of a pH scale, and if you haven't heard of a pH scale, a pH scale is a parameter that is used to measure how acidic a substance is or how basic or alkaline a substance is. If a substance is extremely acidic, we say it has a low pH. pH range ya 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. pH 7 is neutral. So that means like the water we take, it's almost neutral. So it can be 6 point something, maybe 7 point something, hapo karibu na neutral. But then when we move to the other side now from from 7 we go to 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Those pH values are extremely basic or alkaline. Okay, very alkaline or basic. So kwa pH scale tuko na three parameters. The first one is acidity, the second one is neutral, which is 7, and then we have basicity or alkalinity, which is a scale of 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So the further you move from 7, you see 7 is neutral. So if you are around 7, the whether it is a base or an acid, it is almost neutral because it is closer to neutral. So the further you move away from the neutral number 7, the more alkaline a substance is going to be. Like for example, if 7 is neutral, 8 is closer to neutral than 9. So if you were to talk about how strong a base is or an alkali is, 8 and 9 are not as strong as 14. Why? Because 14 is further away from 7, which is neutral. Same thing to acids. A strong acid is either 1, 2, or 3. From 4, 5, 6, because they are closer to neutral, they are less strong acids. So therefore, if you get exposed or if your cells get exposed to extreme pH, like for example, very acidic pH, you will find that that pH will destroy the protein in your cell, and then the cell membrane will be denatured, which means that you're going to have that part which has been burnt by an acid being corroded and destroyed. Ndio maana unasikia mtu alimwagiwa acid and then they were beyond recognition because all the protein layer in their cells were destroyed. So therefore we say that every cell membrane is sensitive to changes in temperature and pH. Okay. The last feature or characteristic of a cell membrane is that a cell membrane a cell membrane possesses electric charges. It possesses electric charges. That means a cell membrane has both positive and negative charges. A cell membrane has both positive and negative charges. What this means is if you expose a cell into a charge, like for example, positive charge, it will respond by having a negative charge. So therefore, the importance of a cell being polarized ama possessing positive and negative charges is that it affects the way substances move in and out of the cell. So it can adjust. Like for example, previously I had talked about impulses, electric signals. So electric signals are capable of transportation in the body because the body has both positive and negative charges. Okay, so therefore a cell membrane has positive and negative charges, and this is what we refer to as being polarized. So in an exam, if they ask you to list three adaptations, three features, list three characteristics of a cell membrane. You will say it is polarized, meaning it possesses positive and negative charges. Then you will say it is sensitive to temperature and pH changes. What does that mean? It is going to be affected by extreme temperatures, or it is also going to be affected by extreme pH like acidity. So therefore, it is going to be affected by pH and temperature changes is the second feature. The third feature is every cell membrane is semi-permeable or selectively permeable, meaning it only allows materials that are small sized to pass through, and materials that are large sized, they do not pass. What is the difference between a cell wall and a cell membrane? We said a cell membrane is semi-permeable, not semi-permeable. Another difference is that a cell wall is made of cellulose, so that makes it very hard. But a cell membrane is not made of cellulose, therefore it is not as hard as a cell wall. Here I have some study questions. Let's do these study questions together and see what we will how we have understood that subtopic. ready for this? Let's begin with question 1. Kindly let's see what I've displayed. Let's look at it. So study question. Name the components of a cell membrane. So component means what makes up something. So anyone who will tell us the components of a cell membrane, what makes up a cell membrane? Anyone is free to answer. Anyone who will tell us what are the components of a cell membrane? We have just studied them. There are 3. What makes up a cell membrane? We have 2 phospholipid layers. We have 2 phospholipid layers which are made of lipid and we've said 2 phospholipid layers and 1 protein layer. 2 phospholipid layers and 1 protein layer. The other question, give 2 functions of the cell. What are the 2 functions of the cell membrane? Now remember we said cell membrane surrounds a cell. So there are 2 main functions. The first function is it keeps what is inside on the inside. Okay, so a cell membrane keeps what is inside on the inside, or we can say a cell membrane is going to enclose the contents of a cell. It encloses. The answer here is it encloses the contents of a cell. So most of the substances which are inside the cell don't move out because of the cell membrane. So a cell membrane encloses the contents of the cell. And number 2, the other function of a cell membrane is that a cell membrane, it regulates. A cell membrane regulates what enters the cell and what leaves the cell. So you say a cell membrane regulates entry of materials into the cell. It regulates entry of materials in the cell, inside the cell, and what leaves the cell. So that is those are the answers to that particular question. So I hope you follow. Has that makes it perform whichever function it performs. Like for example, we've said hii swali ni kama kuulizwa state 3 as features or characteristics of a cell membrane. So ukiulizwa state 3 features or characteristics of a cell membrane, the cell. Okay. The other characteristic number 3 that we should explain on how a cell membrane is adapted to its function is prevented from passing through.
Mr. Nelson. Mr. Nelson.
Madam Mama, can you hear me?
I think it's the internet. You're breaking, as in like unaenda unanyamaza kidogo, inarudi tena hivyo. You could check the internet.
So then, let's do this then, eh? Because I have talked about, I hope the learners have grasped what we've been learning about, because I hope nimeanza kupotea mwisho si uko katikati. Si then we can do this cause niko mbali na si uko home, hata ni mahali nimepitch ka tent nikaamua nifunze ndio to skip hii lesson. Because tomorrow in the morning we're going to have biology.
Okay. You can
I'll be
finish
in
up.
the house. I'll be in the house and I'll have my internet, so it will be stable enough.
Okay.
Then we can finish up on the same. So we will complete these questions and then we learn about something else. But I really hope
That's
that the learners have grasped what we've learned about that the cell membrane and properties of the cell membrane and cell specialization. So if they give me a feedback of whether they have understood what we've learned, it would be very, very grateful. I mean, I will be very grateful. I mean, so if you guys have understood what you've learned about cell specialization and cell membrane, you can type understood, so that tomorrow I will just pick up from the questions which you are doing and then continue. Thank you. Wenda has said that she has understood, so I want to believe she's speaking for everyone, because then that means I was audible for the better part of the lesson. So maybe let's end the lesson now so that I can also get to go home. And then tomorrow in the morning, as early as 6, we should be ready for the lesson, and then we're going to pick up from there. I'll do a recap of what we've done today, so don't worry, and then we'll pick up from there and talk about something else. So thank you very much. And I wish you guys a good night and take care of yourselves. Tomorrow we'll meet, God willing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
okay. Good night. See you tomorrow morning.